Marriage Interrupted.
Marriage and ADHD.
I'm Felicia Horton.
I'm Jonathan Horton.
We are just an old married couple who learned later on in life that Jonathan has ADHD.
I guess.
We think. We believe. It's what we're working on. Not professionals in any way. Not certified. Just two plain people who wrote a book kind of bearing it all. Sharing and showing the world all of the tough times and the good times.
Pros and cons.
The good and the bad. The up and the down. So welcome. Thank you for joining in. Thank you to all of our subscribers. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you. Thank you. And I'm so grateful for hitting that subscribe button. And
What does that mean
following
anyway, by
us.
the way?
What does it mean? It means that they will get notifications every time we post something new.
Aha.
And they're one of our followers, which we are very grateful for. So I thank you all for subscribing and following and watching. So today,
Our one follower.
oh, we have actually quite a few now. We do. And we're just going to keep doing it if it grows or if it doesn't grow, because even if it's just helping that one person, just one person, it's worth doing this.
It is. That makes worth it.
We felt alone. We felt like we didn't have any help. And so we want to make a change. So with that, today we're going to talk about kind of a self-ADHD analysis, exam, quiz, test, checklist, symptom checklist.
Do I get to quiz you this time?
You could quiz me if you want. We'll quiz each other as we go. So, and I think we talked about this before. I've got lots of issues, whole bunch. I have been to multiple therapists, and each time they say they do not believe I have ADHD at all, but they did give me other labels. That's not why we're here today. We could discuss those later. None of them were clinically defined, but they weren't ADHD. So
They didn't lock you up. That's a good thing.
no, but if they locked me up, it wouldn't be for ADHD. It'd be for one of my other many things. So the checklist, back to why we're here today. So I'm going to ask Jonathan some questions. We're going to kind of discuss things a little bit on the self-assessment for if you do not have ADHD. If you're wondering, kind of curious, you or a loved one. All right, so how often, and you're going to say never, rarely, sometimes, often, or very often. The thing with ADHD, we all have these characteristics at some point. It's how often and for how long. So if it's just been the last couple months, but it's happening a lot, it could be for other reasons. If it's been well more than 6 months, a year, or your entire life. Now you're leaning toward that diagnosis. So how often do you have trouble wrapping up the final details of a project once the challenging parts have been done? Truthfully. As truthfully as you
What were
can
my
be.
options again?
Never, rarely, sometimes, often, and very often.
Sometimes.
You believe just sometimes.
Yep.
Okay. So without putting you on the spot, we won't talk about the unfinished tray for all my fruits and veggies or any of the broken toys for my
Was
granddaughter.
that an official project?
You tell me, was it? You said, don't buy that in the store. I'm going to make you one. And that was 2 years ago.
Well, you got a new basket for it, though.
So more often than not, that does occur. If it's a paid project, if you're on the job.
So
You
go to
finish
the
it.
middle one and up one.
What are you talking
The
about?
middle one.
But they don't see that. They're watching. They don't know that says sometimes to often.
Often.
Okay.
What was the top one?
Very often.
Very often. So I don't think it happens very often. But
Okay.
just-
How often do you have difficulty getting things in order when you have to do a task that requires organization? Never, rarely, sometimes, often, or very often?
Probably often.
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 Okay. On some of these too, when you do an ADHD assessment, you always want your loved ones to kind of share in some of those thoughts with you to help you see things that you may not see as well. How often do you have problems remembering appointments or obligations?
Actually, I've been really good on that one.
You've been a lot better. But what are your tools to do that? Do you need tools to remember, or is it something that comes naturally?
Definitely not naturally. Using a calendar is a good tool. Definitely a good tool.
And you use another tool,
What's that?
your alarm.
And my alarm.
You do use an alarm daily. And then you also use your loved ones as well to have us chime in
Remind me.
and remind you. It's not just me,
That
the kids
works.
will help too. How often do you fidget or squirm with your hands or feet when you have to sit down for a long time? This one I find interesting, and we'll see how you answer this.
Rarely.
Okay, so I want you to think about how many times we're cuddling on the couch or we're laying in bed and I ask you to stop tapping your foot.
That's not fidgeting for sitting
That is
someplace too long.
fidgeting. You tap your foot when if you're idle too long. See, that's where the ADHD conversations come in, because you don't realize often some of those things that fall into
I
those
just have,
categories.
maybe I have music in my head. I'm just tapping to the music.
You may, but if we're having a conversation and you have music in your head that causes tapping, that's a distraction. Okay. How often do you feel overly active and compelled to do things like you are driven by a motor?
I don't really understand that one.
So do you feel like you have to keep busy?
No.
No, that he does not. That's an easy no. That one he doesn't fall under that one. He's okay. You're okay with not doing
Not being busy.
not being busy, just sitting there doing nothing.
Well, does that happen?
But it's not even nothing. No, you will be on your phone or watching TV or something. But you're right. You're not compelled to just keep busy. How often do you make careless mistakes when you have to work on a boring or difficult project, or just in general make careless mistakes?
Rarely.
Okay, so I want you to tip your head down to the camera.
That has nothing to do with that question.
I think it does. How often do you make careless mistakes? A careless mistake is a careless mistake. Want to tip your head down? Okay. No, like really tip it down and show them the gouge in your head.
I'm gouging my head.
Why is that?
Because I forgot I was too close to a doorway and I got off a scaffolding and walked right into it.
And how often has that happened?
Rarely.
You rarely hit your head? Are we being honest
No,
here?
you said how often do I rarely jump off a scaffolding into a doorway?
No. How often do you hit your head when you're working? Because
Once in a while.
you're not aware of your surroundings and you make mistakes.
No, we've gone through that. I don't have feelers. There's no hair up here, so it doesn't hit the hair. Say, whoops, I'm getting close. It's boom, I hit my head.
Have you ever hit your head when you were wearing a hat as a form of a feeler?
Yeah, and then no evidence of me hitting my head.
But you still hit your head when you have your hat on. Okay. How often do you have difficulty keeping your attention when you're doing a boring or repetitive works, such as taxes or reading over our book we wrote as you help edit?
The first,
Right.
second one,
Just rarely?
Hmm?
Or often?
maybe often.
Yeah. Okay.
If it wasn't boring, it would be less often.
Right. Well, that's the key word there. It's very important to, if you're not engaged, if you're not hyper focused, if it doesn't really have your attention, it doesn't have your attention, right? How often do you have difficulty concentrating on what people say to you, even when they are speaking to you directly?
It's a trick question.
Why is that a trick question?
Is this? Did you write this question?
I did not write any of these questions. It's an official form.
You're trying to get me to say I don't listen to you.
No, I'm not trying to get you to say that, but what is the truth there? Does it
Occasionally.
happen occasionally?
Often. Is that the first one?
Often or very often, Jonathan?
Maybe very often.
Okay. How often do you misplace or have difficulty finding things at home or at work?
Often.
Maybe very often on that one? maybe.
What's the difference between very often and often? It's still often.
It is, but it's just, can you go a whole day without having to look for something misplaced like a tool
Occasionally.
if you don't work that day?
Why would I be looking for a tool if I'm not working?
Exactly. All right. How? I love this one. How often are you distracted by activity or noise around you?
Often.
Okay. And you hear every noise. Every noise. The clock ticking downstairs. How often do you leave your seat in a meeting or other situations and where you're expected to remain seated? And that would be extended to how often are you standing at a store with someone and you wander off, or how often are you...
Two different things.
No, they're not. They're not.
The difference
How
between
often...
sitting in a meeting and standing in a line.
Or just in general, how often are you engaged in a situation and you leave it? Just leave it because you're done.
Depends on the importance of the...
Your focus on.
Would I get out of line at Disney? Never.
Would you be shopping with me and find something interesting and maybe walk away and not tell me?
All the time.
All the time is correct there. All the time. Jonathan, where'd you go? Jono. All the time. Oh,
You didn't keep my attention.
My mother's favorite thing. Well, apparently she doesn't either. Okay. All right. How often do you feel restless or fidgety?
Occasionally.
Okay, that one is not as often. How often do you have difficulty unwinding and relaxing when you have time to yourself? Yeah, you're pretty good at that. You could do that. You could do that
I
sometimes.
can do that.
How often do you find yourself talking too much when you are in a social situation?
Rarely. You think more than rarely?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. If it's a large situation, you have to talk to a lot of people, no. But if it's one-to-one, when you worked at the Padres, you had long conversations with people.
If I know somebody, if they're my
When you're
friend,
working-
of course I'm going to talk
No,
to them.
not necessarily a friend. When you're working and people come from other houses over to your job site, you chat with them. Yeah. When you're in a conversation, how often do you find yourself finishing the sentence of the people you're talking to before they can finish it themselves?
Never, rarely. Really.
Yeah,
No,
it depends.
Because
on
I
who you
hate
take
when
that.
people do that to me.
Okay. All right, I'll give you that one. How often do you have difficulty waiting your turn in situations when turn taking is required? Like if you're in a conversation, how good are you at waiting for your turn to talk?
I think I'm pretty good. Except with you. Out in the real world.
What about with your children?
Yeah, I think I'm really good at that.
You do?
I let them talk. I listen.
You interrupt them.
I do.
Yes. Yes, you do. And the last one to wrap up just for today. How often do you interrupt others when they are busy?
Rarely that I know.
I would say often.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I interrupt you then.
It's not just me. I see it with the kids when other people are doing things if you need them. So basically what this is just a rough guide. If these are things that are often or very often, this particular guide shows the certain ones that even if it's sometimes but continuous sometimes, like over a long period, these are things that are indicators that you should get assessed for ADHD by a professional. Or if you choose not to and you just choose to go on and say, wow, I do all these things, I've been suspicious, I feel like I may have ADHD, and this is just a guideline that maybe you can seek out some of the tools to help with ADHD.
That's the important thing, just being more aware of, even when I'm on the negative part of this, if I'm just aware, it helps a lot to be more conscious about if I'm interrupting you or tapping my toes.
all those goodies. So I hope this helped. I hope that that just gives you a general idea as we go across and along. In this case, kind of put Jonathan on the spot to answer the questions, but truly answering them yourself is not always enough. It's really important, and when you do go to a therapist, more often than not, they will actually interview family members to get a better insight of your patterns of behavior over long periods. So, I'm Felicia Horton.
And I'm Jonathan Horton.
And this is A Marriage Interrupted.
I didn't interrupt you, did I?
You did a great job.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Give me a peace out.
Peace out.